Welcome to the Asset Revolution podcast, where each week your hosts from Arbor Digital provide educational opportunities for financial advisors and individual investors to gain knowledge in this emerging powerhouse that is digital asset investing. The Asset Revolution podcast is your connection to the future of digital assets and an opportunity for anyone to get off zero. Let's dive in. Alrighty, everybody. Welcome back to this edition of the Asset Revolution podcast, where we go behind the scenes into the work that's getting done in the digital asset ecosystem. I am overjoyed that on today's episode, I have Kristen Mirabella, who is Director of Business Development over at Gemini. Kristen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. And this has been a long time coming, and I know we have so much to talk about. So to kick it off, I know Gemini is a big name in the digital asset eco space, and you've been on plenty of other spots talking about certain things in the ecosystem. But for those that may not know you, give us a quick intro of yourself.
Thanks. I've been at Gemini for going on 5 years now. I have been really excited about crypto, and Gemini has offered a really wonderful opportunity to be part of that journey. And with this team, and to get the chance to work on the types of things we're working on, I really couldn't be more excited for what's to come. But this 5 years, always focused on a biz dev capacity, has been an opportunity to really build on some of my background in TradFi, to be honest. I'd started my career at GSAM, where I was focused on third-party distribution. We worked with wirehouses, and it was distribution of the types of products you'd expect, a lot of mutual fund action. And that was an amazing place to learn the foundations of distribution and wealth and asset management. And I took that to a hedge fund called OXIF, spent a few years doing the same thing, and then found myself wanting to take a left turn. I wanted to see what else was out there. I realized that if a hedge fund to me would have represented, what I thought was, a little faster paced, or for some reason, I had in my head that maybe it would be more exciting. I knew that there was something else out there. And so I took a chance. Instead of going to IR at another hedge fund, I went to manage the fintech business at a law firm called Sherman & Sterling. And I had the opportunity to work with partners who were focused on regulatory practices for banks, broker dealers, funds. And when that was crossed into the fintech landscape, I was starting to have the opportunity to hear about the questions these clients were asking about crypto. And it was becoming more and more frequent. And this was in 2016, going into 2017. Mm-hmm. And I just realized that something really exciting was happening. And that's where I started to learn about it. And I did start to learn about it at that regulatory level and that foundation. And so when Gemini called, and I had this really strange background, this kind of weird mix of institutional knowledge, and now, coming into that regulatory piece of what was happening in crypto, it couldn't have been better timing or more perfect alignment on the type of opportunity we wanted to take advantage of here.
Wow. Oh, so many different directions. And you mentioned, you said left turn when you were making that decision, and we were at that crossroad, I guess. And I'm from Jersey. So I think to me, it sounds like more of a jug handle. You had to go into a jug handle to make that left turn. And it's so true. That's what you feel like. But where were you based out of this entire? Are you based in New York? Where has everything been happening for you?
Always in New York. Well, been in New York for, I guess, about 13, going on 14 years now. Went to school in DC, originally from South Carolina. And so really have just stayed. We've loved it here.
Love it. And then you have a family there in New York. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So we live downtown, have a little girl. She's almost 2. And what's really cool is to be around a toddler and think about what we're building in crypto, to be a nerd about it. And think about even just, we all see toddlers in their screen time, and we think about, they're learning about money. They're going to learn about money in a very different way than all of us did, which is wild. And it's really cool to feel like I will have had something to do with that in a strange way. So it's been a neat time. It was a very strange time to start a family, um, through COVID and everything, and to be in a city like this through those times. But I think we're coming into 2023. Some really good stuff is in store. So
Yeah.
excited.
Wow. There's so many dynamics that are shaping not only how you got into this role at Gemini and solving these problems within the whole ecosystem with Gemini, all of these dynamics just starting a family. And I totally resonate with you on that. In terms of when you're in this building phase, which we all are, so many things and so much work still needs to be done. And man, it's just so it's heartening to hear someone of a more weirder background, kind of more this interdisciplinary approach in these, institutional regulatory, really important, is at the helm of this at Gemini. So I'd love to kind of start now diving into a little bit more in that, specifically in that transition from your traditional background, like going head first in with Gemini, and talk to us a little bit about the problems that you've been trying to solve and are continuing to try to solve for.
Sure. Oh man, where to even start with that? I almost don't even feel like we're just solving problems every day. I mean, there are a lot of problems to solve, don't get me wrong. But it's more, I'd like to rebrand that. I think it's more trying to work with other people who are interested in this, who see a future in it, to come up with creative solutions on what our next step should be and how to think about what this should look like in 5 years. And that's really cool. When I started here, our task was really to understand what institutional involvement in crypto would look like in the near term, what it should definitely look like in the long term. And, about 4 years ago, it was exciting that any institution wanted to talk with us about it. It would
Mm-hmm.
have meant that they were interested in custody, that they were interested in understanding what storage of digital assets at an institutional level could look like at that point. And not only what it looked like then, but what were we planning? How are we going to be able to answer to their needs in a traditional financial, kind of institutional environment? And what was really neat was that enough of us have a background in the space that we started to apply our own interest to the evolution of this approach. And
Mm-hmm.
a couple of years in, a few of us had the unique opportunity to raise our hands and say what we'd really like to focus on. And so my discipline has really been in the area of distribution. So focus a lot on wealth and asset management, pulling from my background, and also more on the fintech side of things. So distribution at its core would mean leveraging our technology and allowing another company to embed our technology to help build their infrastructure and offering a crypto product themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's so widely known that we offer these services, but we've done an enormous amount of work on both fronts to make these services available and help companies provide not just access to crypto, but secure access to crypto.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot to be done there, but that's been where I've personally been spending the bulk of my time over the past couple of years.
Yeah, and I'm happy you dove into that first because this podcast, really what we try to do is go deeper into, what's happening behind the scenes a little bit. And if I were to go onto the street right now, I'm in Austin, Texas, and it's a very tech, very crypto driven actually community and culture here. And same thing if I went on the streets in New York, and I said, hey, if you know who Gemini is, what do they do? And most of them are probably going to point to the retail offering, the exchange, the app on the phone.
Yeah.
But really, I think since coming into this space myself 2 years ago, and then getting with two other people who had spent 2 previous years doing due diligence on firms like Gemini, it was so encouraging to see actually the amount of work that's gone on aside from what I've saw on my phone in the app and the institutional grade from a regulatory perspective that you guys were working towards. And it's part of the reason why in full disclosure, Arbor Digital does utilize Gemini as a partner to offer our, asset management services. But just seeing like what work has been done there on those two fronts was far and above any other exchange. I'm not afraid to say that,
I
might
appreciate
might be a little
it.
spicy here. That's my take. Um, But I'd love for you to kind of dive in that. I think you were starting to go in a little bit, kind of, one thing we'd also like to get out is, Kristen, you have such this unique background and this experience now coming in and solving for these things and working in that biz dev role. So from your experience and perspective, get into a little bit what you feel like, what makes this space or the assets or however you want to call it, what makes it so revolutionary or, evolutionary?
I think about the fact that, looking past digital assets, blockchain technology, and actually what digital assets and crypto do, bring to the table across so many industries. It's not just financial services. And when I started at Gemini, a lot of folks throughout the industry would often say that they were joining this industry for more of a greater good. That if you were just looking at the financial services based opportunities, there's this idea that you could bank the unbanked, that the
Mm-hmm.
sky was the limit. And I still believe that the sky is definitely the limit. Um, but what we're really looking at, and I think the nearer term, is the ability to harness a broader understanding of what ownership of certain assets should look like, what inclusive economics could mean, allowing someone to be empowered by an economy who's historically been left out of that opportunity is really powerful stuff, to the
Mm-hmm.
point that sometimes I have trouble wrapping my head around it, what it could look like, and what the next 5 to 10 years could mean for that type of theme. But generally speaking, I think we all see value in there being greater efficiency in financial markets. That settlement time could be sped up in a way where you're able to capitalize on more opportunities, more volume, because the operational lift becomes a little bit more approachable in terms of, instead of something going to a middle office and it taking 5 days, maybe it takes one day, maybe it takes a few seconds to settle, and that's really cool. um,
Mm-hmm.
so outside of that, outside of ownership, I mean, it goes in every direction, right? We've all seen what's going on with non-fungible tokens, NFTs, and what that has meant for a number of companies, not just
Mm-hmm.
financial services. um, I think Nike might be the company that, as of this week, they were publishing certain revenues that had been generated by NFT sales, and it was astronomical. It was in the hundreds of millions of dollars,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really neat. And again, that points back to the ability to understand what ownership could look. We look at where Web3 is going, and what representation of your own data and your own brand could mean in the future, whether it was for you as an individual posting information online, or you as an athlete. It goes in many directions. So I personally feel empowered by the idea that this is a new asset class. If again, we were just looking at financial services, when in your career do you ever get the chance to help be part of more of a revolutionary idea of embedding a new asset class into an ecosystem, or helping to build the infrastructure that an asset class should run on, or even looking at existing asset classes and helping create efficiencies there based on the type of technology underlying something like digital assets. There's just so much to do. It's almost difficult to try and pick your favorite thing to focus on
Mm-hmm.
in a given week or in a given year. So being a Gemini has been neat because we do so many things here. We have, a credit card, we have the Nifty Gateway, we have our exchange, we have our custody platform. There's so many different things that you can look at and think about how to offer institutionally in a way that you can execute on between now and the next 5 years. So it
Mm-hmm.
always feels like a building block. You always get to see what's happening in another part of the industry real time, and help a client, or help an entire industry think about how they should offer something, or where they can store it, how to keep it safe. It's the kind of boring pieces that a lot of us have to spend day to day on, that I think are kind of like getting us to these next milestones. And then when you have the chance in moments like this where you get to zoom out, it's almost overwhelming because you kind of lose sight, to be totally candid with you, of how much you've been able to accomplish in such a short period of time, just because it's growing so quickly.
Yeah.
There's so much to do.
Yeah, and that resonates as a fellow builder in the space. A lot of times because, and that's one of the kind of revolutionary things I think about this entire space. Because for us, the way we think about it too, it's not just about technology. Like the technology is going to two things, I guess, that came to mind when you were going through that. It's important to highlight is one, that there is so much infrastructure that has been built over the last decades and hundreds of years around money, financial services, bringing that to the world and to people to help us grow as a, as a society. Like, a lot of people get lost in the idea that everyone coming in now with this new technology is saying, oh, there's so many problems, so many things are broken, and we need to make this better. And these are all things that are worth it. And it's okay to say that it could be better. Like, it's okay. Like, we're not calling everything that you've built or everything that the traditional, workers and minds that have built over the last decades, that it was inherently bad. No, not at all. In fact, we're standing on top of that foundation. So I think that's what kind of came to mind there. And I think the second thing is, yeah, things move so fast in this space that you can feel. I've gone from one day where I felt like I am so behind, I haven't done anything, to the net 6 hours later being like, wow, I've accomplished more than I've accomplished in 6 years when I was in the traditional world. How did that happen?
Yeah, yeah, you kind of get the chance to wake up sometimes and think about, what did I cross off my list this week? Oh my gosh, that's really cool. We launched that. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it took a year to get there, and that year included so many developments in the world of crypto that it's hard sometimes to acknowledge even some huge wins, because you got to already be onto the next thing. You have to be ready to build. You got to be able to execute on the other thing that you've been working on for over a year. So I hear you.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you point out, the sentiment on more of the traditional side, because you're totally right. No one's bringing this type of infrastructure to the table saying this is how it should be done. It's better. I go through several projects where sometimes you have to use an analogy to say, well, we're pulling assets this way. It's not different than how a bank does it. And you see the
Mm-hmm.
light bulb go off. And so no one's inventing something totally from scratch here. We do have to build on a lot of existing terminology and concept. And I mean, the types of products that we work on with your team, right? And the Bitria team, um, being really creative with a separately managed account has meant that you were looking across availability of a product set that everyone was looking for. And if ETFs weren't available, it was really cool to be able to lean on a structure like this and say, well, this is available. This is something you can
Mm-hmm.
look at right now. And here's how you can do it. And oh, by the way, there's a really nice looking button that you can push to access it. Um,
Yeah.
it was interesting, coming from my GSAM days. If you ever told me that I would be back in, SMA land or talking about certain things with RIAs, I would have thought you were crazy. And I would have thought you were even crazier if you told me it was because we were talking about internet money being involved somehow. So it's been a really interesting ride.
Oh my, well, I'd love, let's dive into that, right? I want to hear more about this. So tell us a little bit, so Gemini's, you guys have obviously been purposeful about your journey into the RIA and wealth management space. I think, as I was coming in, 2 years ago, I had seen that, Gemini, because Gemini has a venture fund, right?
We do.
Yeah. And, there are investments in other platforms and many other
Mhm.
estimate. And it's clear one thing and that was part of my kind of light bulb moment when I started seeing not just you guys, but other venture funds were investing in these platforms. Oh, okay. There's a need and there's a value that not just Gemini seeing, but many others are seeing in providing services. And that was kind of one of the things for me that was like, I want to be a part of this too. Like you said, if I could play a part, and you know what? This isn't about me, so I'm not going to tell my story. Let's go into take us through the journey into the RA wealth management space, because I know you purchased a Bitria, and when we first got on, it was called Blockchain. So that's a
Mhm.
little piece of history for you there, for who's listening. So take us through what were those conversations like? Why did you guys decide to pull the trigger on getting any one of these platforms?
Yeah, I think over time, certain product features had been available on our platform, such as sub accounting. And at the time, there was no other platform like Gemini's, and the kind of general custodial format where we had an exchange that offered sub accounting. And so, knowing the wealth and asset management space, it was really interesting to me to start to dive in to conversations with folks, especially RIAs, who were curious about putting their clients' assets into crypto, or more importantly, they were getting a ton of questions about crypto and they needed a place to go to either, put it into a portfolio where they knew it would be secure, where they had certain functionality that they simply weren't able to find elsewhere. And what we started to see was usage of our infrastructure that, you know, left a lot of these folks wanting for some of the more traditional bells and to be totally honest with you, that was a really hard thing to discuss internally. Here we are, a very
Mhm.
retail focused cryptocurrency exchange and custodian, but I really think we should embed some of this, seemingly clunky traditional type infrastructure to service this type of um, wealth manager. And when we were able to, internally spread the word about what the opportunity entailed, um, then more folks understood that it was a part of the industry that we needed to be able to support. And we evaluated what it would take to build day to day, how many hours, something as simple as reporting, something as simple as a rebalancing tool or a tax loss harvesting tool, the ability to block trade, and the amount of time that it would have taken in comparison to the things that we really badly needed to put up on the board before the end of the year meant that we were able to evaluate someone like Bitria, whose tech is fantastic. Their team is wonderful, extremely knowledgeable, and it filled every gap that we really weren't able to, nor should we have been able to build on our own at the time. It was really important that we had folks who understood the space and what we were solving for. And that was really impactful. So it was very exciting to add them to the team. Um, because it also meant that when we had conversations with advisors, we could now talk with them about, how they could use the platform and how it would answer their needs, and
Mhm.
not, it's crypto here, you can download this raw data report. We realized for some time that pointing someone to a raw data report for them to hand it to their accountant was not the most user friendly experience. So a lot of fantastic things have come of us getting to work more closely with the Bitria team now. And it'll mean really great things for our other partners in the wealth and asset management space too.
Mhm.
There are other platforms who are built here. You have, other SMAs, you have other, TAMP like platforms, and they'll benefit from some of the underlying technology. So at the top of the conversation, when I pointed to our APIs that could be leveraged, having them in house will just mean that that technology can be leveraged. So, faster ability for certain platforms to remain compliant or for their clients to remain compliant with allocating to digital assets in this way. So yeah, it was not a hard decision. It was definitely a really interesting ride working through an integration, where you were really meshing institutional TradFi type mentality with what we were doing really deep in the crypto space, but no better team to get to build that with. So it's been really exciting.
And as someone who has, I guess, more indirectly been a part of that journey, it's definitely been a very fun ride. And again, not every day is sunshine and roses. We are all, there are limitations in certain other areas, but I think the one thing that really encourages us, and when we see it, is that we all know what the problems are, and we all know where the limitations are, and we know we have plans, and we are committed. And I think that's where it's still a value add to have people that are committed for the right reasons to building the infrastructure to add value to people's lives. Like you mentioned at the beginning, banking the like we want to provide these services to people who maybe in a previous version of a financial ecosystem may not have been able to access them. And that's kind of the bigger mission that we're all working towards. And it's been just and again, it's going to be an interesting ride even moving forward. So I'd like to kind of switch gears a little bit to that. What do you see like kind of down the road? If you can give us a little, I don't want to call it a teaser, but give us some insight. What are you guys thinking about for the next year or two? As because I know regulatory, there are some things even out of our control that we can't do. So I guess I would love to get the listeners some insight there. What are you guys thinking on that end?
Yeah, we're really excited about some of our yield generating products. We did just launch staking for Matic. So I think that that is a really interesting look into the direction we're thinking. Everyone's been wild about yield generation. I know it's also been a slightly scary topic. So what I think is great about Gemini is that we have this unique ability to consider the balance between what everyone really wants, what they want to be able to access in a fantastic product like Earn, but also know that if they're coming here to access that yield, that we're going to think really compliantly and from a place that is considering every type of risk and the counterparty risk that we want to take on to the type of return that customers deserve to get if they're going to take that risk on. Um, and so when you consider something like staking being available, and it's a very crypto native way and a look outside the box from that very traditional way of generating yield, that you can achieve something really special. And so when I look down the road, I see a continuous uphill battle to educate folks on what some of these types of products mean for them, for their clients, what the risk implications are, what being part of this asset class will mean over time. It's not for the faint of heart. And I think that there's some misconception out there that once you learn the fundamentals and once you've gotten over that first hump of thinking, okay, I know Bitcoin, I think I know ETH. Guess what? You're about to not know ETH again. And I hope everyone's reading about it.
Yep.
It's not that the industry is going to keep rugging you knowledge wise or education wise. I think what we're seeing is that there are only more and more resources out there where you can
Mhm.
go to learn about what's coming up next. And so I don't know. I think whether anybody's ready for it or not, you're going to see this continuous drip of more DeFi focused products, more crypto native products. And a platform like Gemini's is going to be poised to be able to support some of those types of products in a way that a TradFi shop might not. So you're going to see someone like a bank continue to have to lean on a Gemini from a custodial perspective to offer something like that, especially if they go to offer it to their own retail customers or through their wealth and asset management arms. So being here is a really exciting place to be because you start to see all the types of interest that's bubbling up for those types of things, whether they're building a fund of some kind and they want to be able to access yield and they're actually open to being really creative on how to do certain things, whether it's store these assets or take a look at staking. Doesn't mean they're throwing everything against the wall and saying, like, let's get weird about this. They're being very careful. These conversations take place over the course of 2+ years. As you mentioned, you guys did due diligence on us for over a year, and that's the standard. That's about how long it takes for someone to get truly comfortable with a product set and where it's going. And then by the time they launch, something totally new is happening in crypto. Imagine the guys who launched and then NFTs started bubbling up.
Mhm.
It's kind of cool to be able to say, well, we have a place you can keep those as well. So I think you'll continue to see more use cases emerge. We definitely need to. I think I hear a lot about payment options wanting to be available.
Mhm.
I think a lot of folks feel as though being able to pay with crypto would speed up mass adoption. I don't know that I totally agree with that. I do think it's an interesting opportunity, but it kind of to me feels a little bit like a chicken and an egg scenario. How are you gonna, unless there's true incentive to pay with crypto, that's not the reason my dad's gonna go buy it. Um,
Mhm. So
so I,
what do you see as the next wave of adoption, or if we're going to get those next million users into the ecosystem, where do you see that coming from?
you know, I think it was really getting interesting with the broad availability of yield generation.
Hmm.
I think the kind of recent events that gave everyone pause, rightfully so. Um, I'm glad it happened when it did, and I'm glad everyone's taking a pause to evaluate again what the balance of kind of risk and return in these scenarios should look like and understand what risks they're taking on when they go to sign up for something like this, especially in a pure DeFi scenario. Um, I I guess that would be the theme. I think about yield a lot and how excited everyone was to jump into some of these strategies. But the underlying concept that seems to get everybody really jazzed is where they can go make more money on their investment. So if this recent kind of downturn was marked by a few, I guess, kind of market themes, the one before that was ICOs, or looking at certain token projects in a way that people were now kind of shielded from, whether that was a regulator's intervention on the types of tokens, and securities that you could or couldn't list on your exchange.
Hmm.
I think that you'll see mass waves of adoption for certain reasons, but those reasons all seem to point to, um, generation of wealth. So I think there's a lot to do there. I think we all need to be really creative about how to keep consumers safe, but also how to be able to offer products that provide that type of return that they're looking for. But again, I think you can do it in a way that combines TradFi with core crypto. And I think that being able to choose a product set on a platform that is really focused on regulation is an important way to dip your toe in.
Hmm.
So if we are thinking about mass adoption, I do think that more platforms need to wrap their heads around what offering some of these products in a regulated way should mean for them.
Hmm.
Um, and so I guess what I'm saying is it's a combination of things, right? Increased adoption from a platform side of what operating the space from a regulated capacity should look like, and what as a consumer you can do, what different types of products as they come out can you use to reach your, whether it's financial goals or just general portfolio goals. If we were thinking about NFTs, you don't want to leave them out of the conversation, wanting to keep them safe, but also understanding that there's got to be broader utility. It could be payments, it could be something else. It's also just increased awareness. Functionality doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have this increased awareness all of a sudden. So I
Yeah.
think it's just something that'll happen over time. Not to be so long-winded about that, but you can tell it's something I think about a lot. I'm just excited to see how it goes.
Yeah, and I love what we do. We try to bring on and have these conversations. To really maybe even think in the moment, because again, sometimes we just need these protected spaces to be able to actually think a little bit differently from our own spaces that we're usually thinking within. So I always love asking that question. So yeah, I mean, anybody who talks in absolutes, I think in this space is usually going to be wrong. Like,
I totally agree.
so I like the answer that it's multi pronged, because we try to be cognizant of that as well. Because the truth is, you can't talk in absolutes. You can't think in absolutes in this space, because once you do, you're probably going to fall behind in terms of if it's going to be something that will actually be adopted, or thought even further beyond just your first level thinking.
Yeah. I mean, there's some folks that are still Bitcoin only. It's fine. Be a Bitcoin maximalist. I support you. But think about what you're missing out on. If it
Hmm.
probably worked 5 years ago that you could be, very strictly that. But I feel like there's so many opportunities that you would miss if you had made that decision at that point. So totally agree with you.
Yeah. Well, it's been so fun to jam with you on all of these pieces that Gemini and you are heading up at Gemini in the RA wealth management space. Obviously our audience is usually geared towards financial professionals, but I know we do have a wide ranging of, individual investors as well. So I'd love to end off our our segment today with some quick fire questions. Maybe just get a little quirky, get a little weird, if you're cool with that.
Yeah.
All right. So first one, what is an accomplishment outside of work you are most proud of?
Uh, well, it's kind of a throwaway to say, my little girl, but if I had to pick something else, because she's awesome,
Clearly.
I'd say having competed at GW on the gymnastics team at a D1 level. That was pretty cool.
Ah, an athlete. I love it. Very nice. Um, so what is something digital asset detractors get right?
Ooh, what did they get right? Ooh, I'm always so quick to read these articles and say like, nah,
Yeah.
um, I think that a detractor would typically, what I would typically hear from one anyway, is that finding the functionality of a custodian where someone at a very institutional or even a governmental agency level would be comfortable with. And I used to say, no, it's not hard, right? But to think about how many exist, to think about the level of due diligence you'd have to do on every platform at this point to understand that you're making the right choice, to understand the underlying technology and how everyone's securing their digital assets, I would have to agree. It's definitely a steep hill to climb. So I think folks like yourselves who have been able to establish an understanding there is a really special thing. And I feel really proud that so many platforms have trusted us to do that at this point, because it is a pretty tall order. But the other thing I guess they get right too is when they talk about the volatility of the asset class. I guess I would just argue that whenever they talk about it being something that would keep them away from crypto in general, it's just how volatile everything else is too. It's not just crypto. So if you were comparing it to anything else right now, especially, I'd say I agree, but with a big but attached to it.
Okay, love the answer. Next one. What is a learning from childhood that you take with you today?
Oh, it probably goes back to gymnastics, to be honest.
Okay.
I think being in crypto has been, again, it's not for the faint of heart. And I think that you have to be able to adapt, especially if you're here building like this every single day. If you're trying to think about what's next and 3 out of 5 times you're wrong and you put as much work into it as you did, I think it goes back to being able to, as cheesy as it is, fall down and have to get back up and keep going because there's no other option. Because it's not even you, it's your whole team that relies on your ability to do that. And we have an amazing team here. And actually a lot of former athletes. So it's interesting what mentality that has kind of brought to the table and what it's led to here in terms of development.
Well, as a also former athlete, I can't agree with you more that so many times when especially in my more distressed moments, building, where I think back to a lot of my learnings as a young athlete that carried me through. So I love that. And here we go. Last one. What is your biggest pet peeve about people in crypto?
Wait, does the answer have to be people in crypto or biggest pet peeve in general?
All right, I'll let you go either one. Go ahead, whatever you're feeling.
I don't know. I think that there's lately there's a if it ain't broke, don't fix it terminology kind of issue we're seeing. So in crypto, just because we're building new technology does not mean we have to come up with new terms for certain acronyms. Like the term RIA, the acronym RIA exists for a very specific reason, and it means a very specific thing. We don't have to come up with another thing that RIA means. We don't have to do that. And so it's been funny to have more of a traditional background and to maybe explain across the industry sometimes, like, no, registered an advisor means this for a very specific reason. Please stop creating other acronyms that mean RIA in the context of this conversation. It's not a thing. But similarly, we've used the word custody before because early in Gemini's days, it was really interesting that usage of the word custody as it related to one of our products here meant that someone on the institutional side of things, more on the TradFi side, could understand that we were serious about offering this institutionally. It really bridged a gap. But as 5 more years have gone by, as you have conversations with, say, a bank, we're now having to split hairs and explain that Gemini is under New York banking law a qualified custodian, but we do have a custody product, and there are very key differences. You can keep assets on the exchange side, and there's a lot of security around keeping them in that way. And we go from top to bottom explaining that. But on our custody product platform, it's segregated addresses, complete cold storage, very, very just different usage of that word. And I pick on us and usage of that term, but I think it's broad usage of that term across crypto that's creating a little bit of a divide on the understanding. So you can tell that's been a sore spot lately, but one that we're working through. We're all going to figure this out. We'll figure it out together.
Yeah. Well, listen, like there is definitely a language problem still within the ecosystem. People can't even decide on what the terminology of these markets are yet. Like we still have like 6 different terms, and hopefully, over time and something, the standards are still being set. And I think even and what really intrigued me about your background, we were talking offline about, doing this episode, was that legal background, that you had this other frame of mind to think about it. And language is really important just for even legal reasons. And when you look at, especially all in the traditional world, they've gone through the pain and suffering by doing wrong things, just even from little simple words misused in different places, and it's cost a lot of money. And so what we do at Arbor Digital is we're trying to be very cognizant of that language as well, as to learn from those mistakes. So I am sure that you guys are also very much
Yeah.
in tune with that.
Yeah, yeah. And what's funny is that, if Gemini had adopted the term like custody, when the platform was built, there are so many things that we look back on and are able to confidently say that wasn't a mistake. We had to do it that way at the time, and that's what got us here. And I think that that's just one small example of how the build is going to continue in this direction. It's really neat to know that you have to make really good and fast decisions about things so that adoption can increase and that people can have access in a safe way to this asset class. You're going to have to feel okay with looking back and thinking, well, we could have done it this way, but that was the only way we had available at the moment. And we did it. We did it well, and we did it within compliance with our regulator. Um, they would have approved of it. You go through this laundry list of reasons you could get hung up on it, but there's too much to do. So all you have to do is chalk it up to cool. If we have to fix it, we'll fix it, but we're moving on. And maybe that goes back to kind of that athletic mentality. I mean, that's how we all have to be. And there are so many people in this industry who you can tell think that way. It's an industry full of early adopters, people who can adapt, people who want to think forward, and it's so energizing, and I'm so lucky to be part of it. And I'm really glad that you guys get to be part of it with Gemini too.
Oh, we right back at you, Kristen. We feel so lucky to have, distinguished, smart, disciplined, responsible, just people. And then on top of that, just the broader team over at Gemini. We definitely share in those feelings. And man, it's been great having you here.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to bring you back. But before we end off, where can people find you if they want to, know more about Gemini or know about you? What do you got for us?
So you can certainly email our team. You could email institutional@gemini.com. We can get you to the right place. They could email you, obviously, if they're interested in allocating.
I promise I did not say anything for that to happen.
That was all me.
I don't want to get
me.
any comment. No, I'm just kidding.
That was all me. Because I don't want every email, but I do
Yeah.
want to hear from everyone. I want it to go to the right place. You can email the Bitria team. They're excellent, and there's always someone available to answer those types of questions. But if it's purely Gemini related, I think institutional@Gemini is a great bet. And mentioning me and mentioning maybe that you heard from us on this conversation, then that'd be a great start.
Wonderful. Well, Kristen, again, thank you so much for taking the time and energy. Thank you for all the work you do on a daily basis. So even if you're in a moment, just know that you got a lot of people rooting for you guys.
Thanks.
And everybody, thank you for joining us. Be sure to tell somebody today that you care about them, and we will see you next time on the Asset Revolution podcast. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you.
Asset Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Marc Nichols. Please don't forget to let us know how you like the show by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to listen. For more downloadable digital asset resources and educational opportunities, please visit us at arbordigital.io. We are here to help you get off zero safely and securely. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to tell someone you care about them. Cheers.
financial advisor, unless you're under contract with or actively speaking with Arbor Capital Management or Arbor Digital, a division of Arbor Capital Management. This podcast is just that, a podcast. It is not financial, legal, or tax advice. If you have individual questions, please reach out.